Welcome to another devlog for Towercraft, a roguelike tower defense game where you build the map and craft custom towers. I'll be covering what I was able to accomplish during days 14 to 19, which was mainly new tower artilleries. In the previous devlog, which covered days 11 to 13, I added smart aiming, a stat system, and the boulder and ballista artilleries. Day 14, I was able to finish 3 new artilleries. The spike artillery shoots spikes, like a pile of spikes, and they land on the ground, and then any enemy that walks over them takes damage. They last for about 3 or 4 seconds. It's very similar to the boulder code. It's picking a spot on the ground, and then it's shooting the projectile to that spot. One of the major upsides, there's no limit of how many hits a spike can do. When it shoots, the saw blade extends to the target and then retracts. And then the moment it retracts, it can shoot out again. So the saw blade doesn't have fire rate. But how do you make it shoot faster? Projectile speed makes it shoot faster. So I just added a 200% increase, which is a lot, keep in mind. And you'll see it's shooting a lot faster. There's a very interesting combo you can do. The spinner foundation removes the ability for the tower to aim. Because of how the saw blade works, if we get a turret with more artilleries, so maybe MD V4, multi-directional V4, you'll see how it's spinning and multiple saw blades are hitting the enemy. So if we have a ton of enemies, hopefully it doesn't lag too badly, you see it just tears through them. How fast it spins scales with aim speed. So if we increase aim speed, this tower will get extremely potent. Now, again, this combo, it's not game breaking, but it's very, very strong. I really like the saw blade and how it utilizes stats differently than the other artilleries. The bullet artillery is the first hit scan artillery that I made. Hit scan is using a raycast. So it's basically drawing a laser from the artillery just straight ahead. And if that laser hits an enemy's hitbox, it will deal damage. It has a relatively high base fire rate, so it scales very well with the fire rate stat. This is 9 bullets a second by using forward V3, for example, and you get this machine gun type tower. It would be applying on hit effects very quickly. On day 15, I was able to do 2 new artilleries. The missile is very similar to the arrow. In fact, I was able to just pretty much copy and paste the arrow completely. The big difference, though, is that it deals damage in an area of effect around its impact. To kind of differentiate it from the arrow a little bit, I made it significantly longer range, slightly less damage, and I also started the movement speed at 0, the projectile speed at 0, and it slowly gets faster and faster. The lightning ball is the bouncing artillery. It's very bad against single targets, but against targets that are close together, it's very strong. It bounces up to 4 times. This was pretty fun to program. When it deals damage, instead of being destroyed, it searches for a new target. Once it deals damage 4 times, it stops bouncing, it destroys itself. On day 16, I added the lightning bolt artillery, the railgun artillery, and a new foundation. You see the lightning bolt here in the background. It's not necessarily shooting where it's aiming. So the kind of gimmick with the lightning bolt is that it hits a random enemy in range, basically in front of it. Okay, so do you see this giant cylinder that's flashing? That giant cylinder is where it's searching for enemies. Because of its major downside of being unable to focus one target, I'm balancing it in a way where it's going to deal more damage compared to other single target towers. After the lightning bolt, I made the railgun. It shoots in a straight line and damages every enemy in that straight line. Unlike the bullet, it does not stop at the first enemy hit. I actually make it go to the end of its range. So if I increase the range like this, you'll see that the line goes all the way to the edge. To balance the fact that the railgun is able to hit every single enemy in a straight line, I make the base fire rate very low. In the proper situation, the railgun is extremely powerful. You'll see we have a nice straightaway for something like the railgun. So we're getting like a ton of value out of this railgun. I think now would be a good time to talk about the foundation that I added, the fixed foundation. So with the fixed foundation, it sets the aim speed to 0. I made it so that when the aim speed is 0, you can aim the tower with your mouse, with mouse scroll. I can set this to railgun and aim it straight down this path. It's gonna be hitting every single enemy. On day 17, I made the Matrix Artillery. We have 2 towers here. This one has the Matrix Artillery. This one has arrow. And you'll notice how the Matrix doesn't do anything. That's because the Matrix Artillery needs a second Matrix Artillery tower to connect to. If I change this to Matrix, it creates a wall of energy between them. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's 2 walls here, because this tower connects to this one, and this one connects to this one. A tower with the Matrix Artillery has its aim speed set to 0, but because the aim speed is 0, you can manually aim it. And this is important because it's not just gonna connect to anything. If the angle is too great, it won't connect. What do these walls do? Well, I mean, as you probably guessed, the enemies pass through them and they deal damage, or they take damage when they pass through them, rather. Now you'll see that they also get stunned. This is the only way to stun enemies in the entire game, because this is the only way I can ensure the enemies won't be perma-stunned. They will get through it eventually. The stun duration scales with the fire rate. If I increase the fire rate, it will now be stunned for 2.4 seconds, plus 0.8, so I believe. Yeah, so it adds the stun together, yep. Because both of these walls, there's 2, they hit at the exact same time. The Matrix Tower, it has a pretty hefty investment, right? You have to have multiple towers with the Matrix Artillery, but the payoff is significant. It's worth noting that when you have a matrix of Matrix Artillery towers, the Matrix Tower that gets connected to is not the closest. It's the one that it's pointing to most directly. So you can kind of see that here. On day 18, I finished the Hoverblade and Raise Artillery. This is the Hoverblade. It's basically like a flying shuriken that spins every second. Hoverblade was pretty easy to make, to be honest. It's just a projectile that flies in a straight line and deals damage to any enemies in its area every second. It's important that these have a good setup, or as you'll see, it's very hard to make use of them. But if your setup is good, you will be able to get a ton of value. Raise is a little bit more interesting. It's basically a spike wave, but it interacts with stats in a very unique way. Each spike deals damage, like, individually. The wave isn't like one thing. The spikes themselves are what's dealing damage. But the unique thing about this is that fire rate doesn't actually make it shoot faster. So what does fire rate do? Well, fire rate increases the amount of spikes. So with fire rate up 200%, this is what it looks like. You actually want a slower projectile speed. Ideally, the projectile speed matches the enemy's speed, or maybe just a little bit faster than the enemy's speed. So you want a high fire rate and a low projectile speed. This artillery will do a lot of work. If you can get a very high fire rate on this tower, it will hit so many times. So how does this work? The vast majority of the artilleries just fire one like projectile that does its thing. This has 2. So it fires an invisible projectile that just travels through the air. It shoots a spike spawner, and that invisible spike spawner spawns the spikes. Day 19, I finished the artilleries. Arc, what does that do? Well, it draws an arc on the ground and damages all enemies that it hits. The interesting part of this is that the arc gets larger the farther away it is from the tower. You're actually incentivized for having this tower, to make this tower farther away. And I actually just had an idea. I think I should have the damage increase based on distance as well. I think that would be very interesting. So actually, like, this close would be a damage, like, decrease. It would require a decent amount of setup to get this working optimally. It fills that niche of, like, horizontal AoE. There's a lot of vertical, like, straight away from the tower area of effect, but this is the only one that's horizontal. After Arc, I added 2 new foundations. The Spinner Foundation, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and the Burst Foundation. How does the Burst Foundation work? What does it do? It has ammo. It has an ammo reserve, okay? And when it has ammo, it can shoot. And it shoots very, very fast. So it has a 300% fire rate bonus. And shooting consumes ammo. When it has no ammo, it cannot shoot. It regenerates ammo every 2 seconds. And it only regenerates ammo when there's enemies. This tower is very good at kind of like a last resort. Because if it's constantly shooting at enemies, it can never, like, build up a reserve of ammo. It's always going to just shoot. And then once the enemies reach it, in fact, let's up the range. It's going to shoot very, very fast. Remember, the railgun typically shoots extremely slowly. Low damage, high fire rate artilleries, Burst isn't really good with. So let's use the bullet artillery, for example. Let's make the range go back down. You'll see that it'll shoot 12 bullets a second, which is awesome. Right? So yeah, it's shooting really fast, but it's not doing much. That's it for devlog number 5. I really hope you enjoyed watching. The next devlog is going to be on saving and loading, so make sure you're subbed so you don't miss it. Make sure to like and comment for the algorithm, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.